We have 5 items today, and I'm going to be a little bit flexible in how we manage the schedule here, but I'll just go through very quickly the 5. The plan is to have Ellen get up and talk about the court budget transfer that the commission took action on in a November meeting regarding attorney for indigent defendants' pay. So she's going to get up and kind of get you the facts and the data behind that, which we had promised we would do at the time you passed that. So that's number 1. Then, because we have an external person coming in on the discussion regarding solar panels and energy, and he's a teacher from Mays, we'd like to be respectful for his time, so we'll put that as number 2. Then number 3 will be the legislative agenda, because we have to vote on that tomorrow, and some of you may have to leave early for other meetings, so we'll do that 3rd. Then Basil is here to talk about 150 North Main, and he has a presentation on PowerPoint he'd like to give, so we'll do that 4th. And then finally, if we have time, we'll talk about Northeast Park appraisal numbers that Tanya has received from Steve Martins, and we need action on what we're going to do with Northeast Park next. Now, that is not time sensitive, so we'll put that at the end. We have to push that till after the first of the year. So that's kind of lineup for today. And with that, Ellen, you would get going.
Morning, Ellen.
Good morning. Ellen House, Court Administrator for the 18th Judicial District. First, I would like to thank you for approving the transfer of $340,000 in November to help cover our attorney fees. They are not only for indigent fees, but one of the areas that we are seeing the largest growth in is, of course, child in need of care. Back in 2015, the then commission approved the district court to start paying our court-appointed attorneys at a rate of $70 an hour. Up until then, we had only been paying $50 an hour, and we were finding it hard to get attorneys to continue to work for that rate. We are still getting a very good deal as far as having quality attorneys work for us for $70 an hour, but I appreciate the support of phasing that in over the past 4 years, and we are now paying all of our court-appointed attorneys based on a rate of $70 an hour. Back in 2017, attorney fees topped $1.9 million. That was the highest they had ever been at that point. That was partly due to the increase in the rate, but also due to the increasing number of indigent defendants who required court-appointed attorneys, as well as the child in need of care. Between 2016 and 2017, this district saw a 10% increase in the filing of child in need of care cases. Between 2017 and 2018, that went up another 3.4%, and then between 2018 and 2019, again, we have seen another 10% increase. So if you add all that together, that's like 23% over the past 3 or 4 years. Child in need of care cases tend to be our most expensive. Usually when you appoint an attorney in a case, you have one defendant and one attorney. And so you may pay, for example, if it's a misdemeanor plea, we pay $210. It's based on 3 hours. It's a flat rate. However, in sync cases, the child themselves have an attorney. The mother has an attorney. The father and any alleged father. Sometimes there can be 3 or 4 alleged fathers in cases. They have attorneys. Grandparents may have attorneys. So there are multiple attorneys that we are paying in every single case. So when you consider the fact that the number of cases themselves has had a huge increase, you multiply that by at least 4, and that's the result of, or that's what happens to the attorney fees. Family law is another area that we provide attorneys in when someone is in contempt in a family law case, and those cases over the past 2 years are up about 10%, 6.5% between 2017 and 2018, and another 3.5% between 18 and 19. Additionally, juvenile offender cases are up 7.5% over the past 2 years. And, you know, when you and I were growing up, a juvenile offender case might be a truancy case. It might be, you know, someone who threw a paintball or something at their neighbor's house, that sort of thing. Now we are finding an incredible number of juveniles who are committing very, very serious crimes. We're talking murder, rape, arson, kidnapping. Unfortunately, those are becoming more and more common. And so while the state pays for felony adult case representation, the felony representation for juveniles falls to the county. And so we're seeing an increase in the severity of the cases, which increases the amount that we're having to pay in attorney fees there. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Very good. Any questions? Don't see any. We
Okay.
appreciate you coming and briefing us on it.
Thank
so
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. That was a little faster than I thought. Why don't we, let's talk about solar next, and let me just kind of give an introduction before Andrew gets up and talks, and then when the gentleman from Mays gets here, we'll defer the podium to him. We have talked about, since last summer, staff has talked about solar, and the conversation actually increased to just energy as a topic. And so on the agenda tomorrow is an approval for solar panels, but the conversation goes a little bit deeper than that. I know there's a couple of issues here. First of all, there's an issue with what the backup material says. And when the CIP committee moves something through and it becomes an ask for an amendment to CIP, that's what goes on the backup material. And we don't feel like we can alter backup material because the commission has not instructed us on what steps to go forward with. That's why the backup material for this item looks the way it does. Now, I do agree, and the chairman and I talked about it yesterday, when I looked at the backup material, this doesn't seem like it's been refreshed. It seems like there's been a lot of things that have happened, and yet you still get this same backup material. So I've talked with some staff, and we may have to change that policy on what we carry through from the CIP committee and the amendment to the backup material so that it's more refreshed, but that would require a little bit of a different policy than what we've done in the past.
Does the CIP committee see the same? Is that the information that they see to make a decision on? Well, how can they make a decision on something when it doesn't make any sense to me and I'm using the same material? So evidently we're not providing the right information to the CIP committee if we're providing that sparse bit of information that's not even correct.
That was the CIP form that the CIP committee sees.
But we have to give them information that they can make a decision on to send it to us to say that this is a decision that the CIP committee agrees with. They're the ones that we rely on to be able to make a decision to recommend something to us. If they're getting bad information, they're going to make a bad recommendation to us.
There's also discussion that happens with the CIP committee, and we brought this forward to you. And there was further discussion that took place, when we had the discussion at staff meeting, that we indicated that the CIP committee did not recommend the tag office. They recommended Extension Center.
But you can't pick that up from the backup material.
Okay, well, then that needed to be refreshed.
I think that's what we're talking about doing here, is refreshing that piece of it, that after the CIP committee makes a move to suggest this change, that they would then change that
Our
language.
backup material, there needs to be information that we can review so that we can make a decision that supports whatever that the CIP committee said.
Okay.
If that's not what the CIP committee is getting, and it's bad information going to us, we're going to make bad decisions.
Okay, fair enough.
So they made an uneducated
No,
position?
I think they made an educated decision. It's just that the language on the paper did not get pushed forward.
But they were given different information?
No, I think they were given the same information.
Well, then
So
then how's it an educated position?
How's it what? The chairman's point is correct, I think. We faced the same thing when I was over at the city. What's on the backup material needs to be accurate, contemporary, and reflect the issue. Because I always look at it, I know you guys know what's going on, but citizens read that, and they need to have the whole picture. And so we'll talk as staff on these kinds of issues, as we push them forward in the future, maybe deviating from what we've done in the past and putting more contemporary, refreshed information on. I think that is a germane point. But back to your statement, Commissioner, I think the committee looked at this with accurate information. Andrew presented all of the information that we're going to talk about today and tomorrow they had. I don't think there was any misinformation or any, at the time when they looked at it, there was a discussion of putting it on top of the tag office versus extension. They thought and recommended as a committee we move forward and put it on extension. To the chairman's point, that backup material should now reflect that, and it does not. And I think those are the things we need to change in the future as we put backup material forward. So give us as a staff a chance to work on that. And I don't want to detract from this today, but and just before Andrew gets started, I think that our Maze person walk in. When we talked about, and all that's on the agenda tomorrow is solar panels, but there's there's a total of 3 components to energy that staff has looked at and we'd like to push forward, and we'd actually like to put this into some type of energy policy for the county. Number 1 is, and this was actually, the chairman brought this up a month or so ago, we need to look at direct renewable participation. And what we initially set out to do was look for direct renewable participation with solar. We have talked with Evergy a couple of times. There is nothing available now on that front, nor does there appear to be anything available in the near future. There are, however, opportunities for direct renewable participation with wind. The zoo currently has that agreement. The county as a whole could aspire to that agreement. We are actually on a waiting list for when they open a second wind field. And that will become a policy decision for you all at that time if that becomes available. It's not if, it's when it becomes available, because they've got plans. And that should be within the next year, so we should take a hard look at that. There's some savings there for citizens. You make a statement as a county that you want to go a certain percentage green. So that becomes a policy discussion for you at that time. We also have agreed as a staff, it's been a long time, over 10 years, since we've done an energy efficient analysis on the 4 major buildings: Courthouse, Munger, Historic, and Reagan. And we probably should do that. Now that is it's a 2-phase CIP discussion. Phase 1 would be to hire and have the study done on those 4 buildings. And then depending on what that study finds, it could add to a second phase, which is windows and doors or things that make these buildings as efficient as they can. So that's the second component. And then the third component is what we're talking about today. Do you want to do something overt and tangible and put solar panels up at the extension center? And Andrew will go through again kind of the cost effectiveness and the payback times on that. And then I think our gentleman from Maze kind of wants to maybe talk holistically about the program. So that's what we need to discuss today. And I don't know if we want to let Andrew go first, or if you want, what order we want to go in here. Maybe Andrew, give us a quick overview. Okay. And then we can let the gentleman from Maze High School. Andrew.
Good morning. Andrew Diltz, Facility Manager, here to present the Sedgwick County Solar Panels County Facilities CIP Amendment. The short background on this, Commissioner Cruz had brought to our attention that Maze High had initiated a solar project out there. We took a quick field trip and met with Stan Burkamp, who will actually be speaking here after me. We reviewed our facilities. The main courthouse and the adult detention were our highest consumers of electricity. We looked at those first and discovered that because we purchase so much electricity for these 2 buildings, we get a very good rate, a bulk discount on our kilowatt per hour with Westar. So it didn't make sense to put solar panels on those buildings. It wasn't very cost effective. We then started looking at smaller facilities, EMS, TAG, and extension office, and the extension office was chosen to go forward. The criteria that we used to make that decision was the return on the investment, which is the ROI. We wanted a high traffic area so it was visible to the public. We looked at the age of the roof and the existing equipment. We didn't want to install the solar panels on top of a roof we were going to have to replace in the near future. And the distance from the building transformer to the solar generation panels. The payback calculator shows the comparison between a roof-mounted system versus a ground-mounted system. The size of the building, and this is kind of hard to see, the size of the solar panels would be 108 kilowatts. The price per electricity per kilowatt hour that we pay Evergy, is 0.085 cents per kilowatt hour. The annual production from the solar panels would be 141,230 watts. We do not have any tax breaks since we're tax exempt, and the initial purchase price for the roof mount would be $225,000 versus the ground mount, which would be $245,000. The payback is actually quicker on the ground mount system, coming in estimated between 14 and 19 years versus the roof mount at, I believe it is 15 versus 21 years. And the reason for that is the ground mount is produces more. The angle, it's at a 30-degree angle, and it collects more solar and can produce more versus the roof mount. It's at a, I believe the roof mount is at a 10% angle, and that's to allow the wind load and the snow load for the roof. Our electrical spend on average, 3-year average for the extension office is $33,000. The ROI here, again, is 15 to 21 years for the roof mount, 14 to 19 years for the ground mount. The ground mount will have a quicker return. We'll have a higher production rate. It is prone to theft, vandalism. We briefly talked about adding some fencing or some sort of security measures to the extension office if we proceed with the ground mount system. It will limit some of the ground space that we have out there for any events, and we will have to factor in how we're going to maintain the grass or the soil around the solar panels.
So is fencing included in the total price?
It is not.
It's not. And so that means that our return on investment is longer because we're going to have more investment.
And that's if we choose to do the fencing. I don't believe Mays has fencing, and I don't know that they've had any issues with that, so that's something we can talk to Stan about. Maybe we can just use our surveillance that's out there and be fine. But it is...
Mays is 135th Street with no traffic except for a few going to school, and this is at 21st and Ridge with tons and tons of traffic, so we can't even compare.
So what would something like a fence cost, though? I mean, it's not $100,000 for a fence.
I don't know what it is.
You want to come up here?
You're going to have to speak for the mic. We can't pick you up.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. He said we're going to have a quiz, so we have to pay attention.
Have at it.
Okay. My name is Stan Burkamp. I've taught out at Mays High School since 1993. I've just served in the Peace Corps in Africa for 2.5 years. So as far as the fencing goes, we chose not to because in talking with Mark Horst, who did the installation, he's never had any trouble at all with vandalism or anything like that. And if you put a fence around it, it decreases your liability. It does increase the cost. I would guess on your system it might be $20,000. If just pulling out a number, I'd say about $20,000, if that. So do you have some more, or do you want me to?
I say you just go.
Okay. So the information that you have, let me give you a little background on what brings me here. So in November of 2017, I went to the Mays Board of Education. And like I said, I've taught there since '93. I teach phenomenal kids. I teach upper-level chemistry, upper-level physics. And I said, you know, this is my calling. This path chose me. Let me go out and try and raise the money to do this. So it hasn't cost the district anything. We've raised over $200,000 as of this point. We secured financing through an independent company who was able to take advantage of that tax credit, which was worth about $120,000. Even if the district had written the check, and I'm glad they didn't, because what's so important is that having the buy-in from the kids, which I'll address in just a little bit, but even if the district had written the check for $400,000, we just bought it outright. Based upon the savings so far, we're getting about a 7.5% return on our investment. because it's just going to save about $30,000 a year on a $400,000 investment. That's a 7.5% return, which is pretty good. I mean, try and find that consistently in the stock market. And from a savings perspective, if you get a 7.5% return on the stock market, you've got to pay taxes on this. This is just money that the district doesn't have to pay in terms of expenses for the electricity. And so I know, and believe me, even though I was in the Peace Corps, I'm the most Republican and most fiscally conservative person you will ever find in the entire world. And so the only reason that this works is because, number one, it works financially. Number two, I teach the best and brightest in Mays. They all come through my door. And these kids are excited about it. You, as a community, if you want to be viewed as a progressive community, you have to do something to keep these kids here. And they are concerned about the future. They're worried about it. They look at the climate change models. And I pray every night that the climate change models are wrong. I do. Because if they're not, it's going to be a train wreck. And if it's wrong, great. You're still going to save money. And you're still going to project an image to the community that says, we're progressive. We're just not going to keep buying electricity because that's the way it's always been done. And so when I go through and I explain to the kids how we produce electricity now, we get all the, say, out of Jeffrey's energy plant up by Manhattan. You go to Wyoming, South Dakota, Kentucky, wherever the big coal fields are, you mine the coal, you ship it there by rail, you burn it in a highly inefficient process to heat up water, you heat up the steam, you spin a turbine, you transmit that electricity 200 miles, where you lose a lot of it in that transmission process. Then you have tons and tons and tons of coal dust left over that you can't do anything with right now except dig a big hole and bury it. And at the end of the day, because I teach physics, at the end of the day, I get to make toast. Okay, because that's how all electricity story ends, is that I get to make toast. I said, or we can sit here and we have a 720 panel system that looks really cool. I mean, the kids are excited. It's like Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. Those kids love to go out there and just walk around. I've had any members of the community come up, stop me and go, that is so cool. It's aesthetically pleasing. And so, or you can produce that electricity 100 yards away from where you're going to use it. You use the energy from the sun. You don't lose very, very minuscule amount in the electricity process or in the conversion process. There's no coal dust. And more importantly, in the state of Kansas, you look at how much water is produced, whether you or wasted, either you use natural gas or you use coal. Projections are the Ogallala Aquifer is going to be going dry, depending on the projection 50 to 7 years ago. The advantage of solar is that you're not wasting any water. And so, you know, when my superintendent came to me and says, hey, what's the disadvantage of us doing this? And I said, literally, there isn't. The only disadvantage is that I'm going to have to go to a lot of meetings and explain how cool this is for the district. And that's what's happened. And so, from my perspective as a member who lives in Sedgwick County, and, you know, give this a serious look. If you have any concerns at all, I know Lacey had said something about, well, maybe the technology has changed. First voltaic cells were built in the 1800s. The technology is simple. It takes energy from the sun, you excite an electron without giving an entire physics lecture. But basically, you excite an electron out of a bound state, you take that electron, you ship it off, you generate a current, you change it from DC into AC, you dump it out on the grid. The only technology that can change is that you're going to increase the efficiency of the solar panels. And if you do a ground-mounted system or a roof-mounted system, you have the infrastructure there. Okay, hey, next year if they make a breakthrough on the panels and they become 40% efficient as opposed to 20%. Okay, great, you have the infrastructure. You swap out the panels and you put in the more efficient panels. So, any questions?
Any questions?
I have some questions.
Commissioner Howell.
Thank you. So it sounds like you're pretty intimately involved in all the details of the maze installation.
A little bit, yes.
So can you talk about, were they installed optimally in terms of like trying to capture the highest output, so you have the panels pointed at, you know, the most prevalent sun exposure in terms of incidence angle and that type of thing?
We kind of had to play a balancing game because of where those panels were installed. It was north of a detention pond. One of the concerns was that if that detention pond completely flooded, would that water get up onto the bottom edge of the panels. So we actually set ours a little bit flatter than what we normally would have, because how you set your panels determines which type of, when your load is going to occur most. So if you set them flatter, you get more of a production in the summer. If you set them a little bit steeper, you get more of a production in the wintertime. So I think your optimum angle is somewhere in the 20s. I think we set ours at about 20 degrees just because we needed to have the bottoms a little bit higher above the ground. So that kind of determined what our angle was. But as you'll get a little bit of variance, but it's, again, you win, you lose. If you set them flatter, you get more production in the winter. You set them a little bit steeper, you get more production in the summer.
Let me kind of restate what you just said so I understand it correctly. In the wintertime, obviously, the sun's a little lower in the sky. Mm-hmm. In fact, I did some study on that. The lowest point in the sky in Wichita is 28 degrees above the horizon.
Okay.
In the summertime, the highest it goes is 76 degrees above the horizon.
Okay.
And then in the summer and winter at the solstice, it's 52 degrees above the horizon. So if you're trying to capture the maximum sun exposure, you're going to be somewhere between 52 and 76 degrees above the horizon. And they should be pointed due south. So I guess that's one of my other questions. These panels, when you talk about PV watts, what I'm just learning right now, that's for
photovoltaic watts.
Voltaic watts. That's basically a nameplate capacity measurement. So are these return on investments, are they calculated based on like how many cloudy days we've got and
what those computer models are based on, and we had the same, Mark Horst of King Solar ran our projected numbers. And they take all that into account. It's a very complex algorithm. So they know on average in the state of Kansas, this is how many cloudy days we're going to have, this is how many sunny days we're going to have. And that's all factored into that production. They're not, because from their perspective, they're not going to try and oversell something that says, hey, it's going to be sunny every day of the year, and here's going to be your production. So that algorithm that they use to generate those projected cost or savings is based upon a very complex model. You plug in like the angle of what what your panel is going to be, how many panels you're going to have. There's any number of factors that go into that. And so we had a projection on what we were going to save, and it's pretty much exactly what that model said we were going to save.
So your 7.5%, is that actual or is that projected?
So as of this morning, I looked, we've saved $17,100 since it went online June 11th, based upon the production of the electricity that's come out of the system. And they just basically say, hey, because the inverters have a monitoring system that keep track of how much electricity flows out of that system. And so basically it's like a meter. You say, okay, this is how much electricity is flowed out. This is what it's worth per watt. And then, so far, like I said, as of this morning, we've saved $17,100. Obviously, we're not going to realize the savings that we saw in August that we're going to see in January because of the shorter days and sort of, tends to be more cloudy. But if you project it out, and I was conservative on the $30,000, I tried to err on the conservative side of that. If you long-term projection, it's actually more like $34,000, $35,000. But I tried to err and be very cautious and say, okay, conservatively, and believe me, I'm the most conservative person in the world. Conservatively, you're looking at saving $30,000, which would be a 7.5% return.
So this system that you showed the calculator for showed 141.23 PV watts.
Okay.
If I understand correctly, just by definition, is that the nameplate capacity of that system?
I don't know, because I figured out solar panel output gets a little strange depending on which side you're talking about. So like our system is a 240 DC current. Okay, so that's the input side. After it goes out of the converters and changes into AC, that drops our system down to like 199.9. So I don't know which side that number is. I'm guessing that's the output side. I can't speak with authority, but I would guess that's your output side on after it's gone through the converters.
It's the output side, or I'm sorry, on the solar panels, it's 375 watts per solar panel.
And how many we're talking about?
290.
All right. I have some technical questions possibly at some point, but I'll just sit back and listen for a bit. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Chairman.
If you multiply that together, you should get really close to the 108 kilowatts that was on the payback sheet.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Thank you. Thank you for coming, Mr. Bergkamp. I know that you have class today, so that's super nice and friendly of you to be here. My question would be, you've raised over $200,000, it says on this.
Yes.
Did you do that via GoFundMe? How did you collect that?
It's funny, out of those $210,000, there were 60,000 of that were like what you consider big checks from Cargill. Cargill donated a pretty sizable chunk, and there were some other checks that came in. But for the most part, out of that 210,000, 150,000 of that came in from former students, from alumni, from parents, from organizations. And so that's what for me, it's become much more, I don't want to sound like a hippie, but no offense, Lacey. But it's become much more spiritual than I ever thought it was going to be. I mean, again, I'm the most conservative person in the world. I challenged my kids, if they raised $3,000, I'd get a tattoo, and they did. And so, might be close to the Sedgwick County Commission meeting, but that tattoo got us $3,000. And so I doubt that any of you are going to offer to get a tattoo for $3,000. But here's the most poignant story that I've got. When I started this, I got two checks. One was from like $11.28, and the other one was $17.51. And they were from a mom of the kid that I was teaching at the time. And I got the feeling that those odd amounts were money that were left over at the end of the month. Like this was after they paid all the bills and the groceries. This is a little bit of money that they had left over. And that's what they contributed to this. And so I'm glad the district didn't write the check, because the kids have buy-in on it. They can say, we were a part of this. And I think as a governing body, it is incumbent upon you to tap into the youth, to have them want to stay, to say, we're a progressive community. And you can have baseball stadiums and you can have river walks and all that good stuff. But that isn't what the kids are worried about. These kids are worried about what's going to happen. They look at the climate change models. And, this is the first lesson that I learned in the Peace Corps, was that you can't change the world, but you can change one little corner of it. And that's what these kids have learned. And are you putting in that system going to change the world? Are you going to stop the climate change models? No. But you're going to set an example for other communities to follow, for these kids to say, hey, I want to stay in this community because we're moving forward to something and we're not just going to accept the status quo.
Well, thank you, Mr. Bergkamp, and thank you for showing us your tattoo.
Yeah, no problem. That's probably never been said before.
First time that's ever happened in any meeting I've ever been in politically. But
so that's the first time I've ever got one either. So
yes, yeah. Oh, I know. I believe you, sir. But yeah, I would like to see the county adopt some idea like this, where we do a fundraising effort, a fundraising campaign. I mean, like you said, it's about buy-in, and the students bought in. It made a difference. I would like to see us maybe look at that model. Mm-hmm. It's the first I heard that's how you started raising money.
Yeah,
this wasn't district funds.
No.
This wasn't public taxpayer dollars.
No.
To do it.
No.
I like it. Thank you.
Not a problem. Thank you. I've had a tremendous amount of support from a lot of people, literally from all over the world.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out today. It's been a very interesting meeting. I like it.
As always.
I'm starting to think that we should just set up a GoFundMe account for all of our duties here at Sedgwick County. I think it's been discussed multiple times. But one thing I'm really inspired by the fact that you have been able to really get people involved in this discussion. So regardless of what happens here, I think it's important to note that we are discussing energy savings. I mean, regardless, taxpayers are going to pay for energy costs. I mean, what do we pay for electricity what do the Sedgwick County taxpayers pay for electricity every single year?
I know that. I don't know the answer.
It's $2 million, roughly $2 million.
So roughly $2 million just in electrical costs. So we're going to be paying that anyway. So this was an alternative to capturing a way to have clean energy that we could then save taxpayers over a certain amount of years. So that's where, I mean, we can talk about fundraisers, and I wouldn't disagree with that. But we're already going to pay this anyway. Taxpayers are already paying for electric. So if we want to save taxpayer dollars in the future, I think that this is, a fiscally responsible thing to do, and it's good for our environment.
Because if you look at like the cost of solar, I wouldn't have taken on this project 5 years ago. I would have not told you to do this 5 years ago because it was too expensive and you would have never got your money back. But the cost per watt of solar has dropped dramatically. And I think what you're going to see, as a matter of fact, they just came out with a big study that was done out in western Colorado with the development of grid-size storage capacity batteries, where there's a bunch of venture capital, like $1.4 billion of venture capital has been invested in developing the next generation of grid-size batteries. I think once you see grid-size batteries come online, you're going to completely change how electricity has been produced and stored and redistributed. And so I think it's like you can either be, kind of ahead of the curve or you can be behind it. But I think, and again, I cannot emphasize, I grew up worshiping Ronald Reagan. If I did not think this worked on a fiscal perspective, I would have never done it, and I would have never told you to do it. And again, you're looking at a return on investment. Find another way that you could spend $250,000 on a project, and you're going to get a guaranteed 5, 6, 7.5% return on that investment, with the benefits of building the support from the community, and you're going to try and something to help retain the best and brightest kids that are in this area to want to stay here.
One more question.
Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just thinking about the when we generate electricity may not be when we use electricity. So when we're generating electricity, if we have surplus electricity, it's got to be. What do we do with that? Is it sold back to Evergy?
God, I'd kill for a chalkboard. So imagine that electricity coming out of that system is like a water. Okay, so electricity acts like water in the fact that it takes the path of least resistance. So that electricity hits with the tank, whatever building you're going to put it on. Okay, Mays High School, let's say. So you have two potential streams of electricity that can feed the building. You can get electricity off the grid, and you can get electricity out of your solar array. So let's say that you need 100 units of electricity to supply the demands of that building. And so if the solar array is producing 80 of those units, then you're only taking 20 units off of the grid. So you're still going to add up to 100. Cloud passes over, you're going to see a dip in your production. That might drop down to like 40. The grid's going to make up that difference and end up at 60. It's 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It's August. It's a cool August day. Your building is shut down. Now, the building load only needs 20 units of electricity, but your solar array is producing 80 units of electricity. So then what's going to happen is that because Kansas is a net metering state, so they're going to come out and they're going to install a different meter on that building. And at the bottom of it is what they call the caterpillar. It's a series of dashed lines. And so if you watch the caterpillar, if that caterpillar is tracking to the right, you're buying electricity off of the grid. If the caterpillar is moving to the left, like at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you are dumping electricity back onto the grid, and that meter is running backwards. So what's happening is that the grid itself is acting basically as a battery. So when Evergy goes to calculate your bill, they're going to take the difference between how much energy excess you dumped out on the grid versus how much energy that you had to get off the grid. And so let's say that you produce 20 units of electricity excess, you've bought 100 units of electricity from Evergy, you're billed then on 80 units of electricity.
So I'm not that familiar with the net metering, but I've heard from some folks that say that the Evergy sells energy at one rate and they buy it from you at a different rate.
This is
So
true.
Does this meter keep track of both?
But that only plays out, this won't happen with your system, because that system isn't big enough that at the end of the month, you would produce like more electricity than you consume. That won't be a concern. That's happened with me because I've got solar panels up on my ranch up by Keachai. So if, like I've had like, it doesn't happen very often, but like let's say I produce 20 kilowatt hours of electricity excess beyond what I even use. They will buy that typically from me at about 3 cents. I think they pay me like 3 cents a kilowatt hour. They turn around and they sell that electricity to you for 8, 11, 12. And if it's peak demand, then they're selling it for a lot more money than that. So, yeah, if I produce more than I'm using, Evergy is making money off of me.
Now, of course, for us to get our energy, our excess energy onto their grid, we've got to phase match. It's got to be
Exactly.
It's got to be clean. It's got to be.
And so what happens is that you're like, I've got a bank of 10 inverters. I don't know how many you're going to have, probably not that many. But but basically the grid operates on a cycle of 60 cycles per second. And so what the inverters do is that they read like it's like a wave. So when they dump that electricity back on that grid, it has to be in sync with the cycles per second that's already out there on the grid. Otherwise, you get a cancellation of that, and that's a train wreck. And so that's why those inverters are so important, because it has to match it in phase with the existing grid.
It's not just the cycles per second, but it's actually if the phasing has to be perfect.
Yes.
For it to go on.
Yes.
And so I guess I'm wondering. So there's going to be some clipping and some losses and some attenuations in the conversion of the DC output of the array to get to that clean energy that's acceptable to Evergy. So
Yes.
Again, the 108 kilowatts sounds to me like that's a direct sunlight calculation, maximum output of these panels. Our calculations for return on investment has to take into account, I should say, the losses that are obviously going to happen somewhere along the way.
And I get, and if, like I said, assuming that they're using the same computer model that they used on my system, that's already taken into account. Because from a business perspective, they're not going to go out and say, hey, Sedgwick County, you're going to save $40,000 a year on a best case scenario, when in reality, you're only saving $20,000. That's just an opportunity for a lawsuit to happen. What I've found is that they tend to be conservative in what they project those savings to be. They tend to err on the side of caution, just like I did when I said, hey, we're going to save $30,000 a year, because it's better to err on that side of caution than to be too cautiously optimistic. So if like I said, from my experience at my shop, on my own place, and at Mays, they tend to be conservative on the savings.
Well, I appreciate some of the details here, because I'd like to go crunch some numbers just for fun. I enjoy that type of thing, so I'll go.
Fellow nerd, I hear you. Yeah.
I appreciate that. I do agree that efficiency is one of my goals, and if we can find efficiency this way, or through insulation, or through lighting, or through windows, those
LED lights,
that'll all
yeah.
be part of our conversation and how to become more efficient. So I appreciate the comments of staff, and I am curious about that roof, and I don't know if this is a question for our staff here, but you guys say that the roof is in good shape, or we don't have to access the roof for some period of time, but these panels are supposed to last at least 25 years. How long is the roof supposed to last?
If I were in your chairs, knowing what I would know, I deal with the ground mounted system.
Yeah. Sounds like we're taking the roof thing off the table, so we're only doing the ground.
I think that's it's up to you, but I think that's the way. Andrew, is that where you're at?
And if nothing else, because of the visibility, if you put it up there on the roof, no one's ever going to know it. But if they can drive by and they're going to see it, and they're going to go, wow, I'm telling you, the aesthetics and the appeal of that is worth just as much in terms of an intangible cost as the savings.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so I'm a hippie, he's a nerd. What are the rest of the three? No names? No names?
Hold
Dang
on.
it. I was hopeful.
Now what?
I was hopeful you had names for everybody,
Oh,
but
God,
that's
no.
okay, Stan. We
No.
won't put you on the spot.
No, come on.
Did you get all of your technology questions answered, Chairman?
Al, yep, thank you.
You did? Did you, Chairman?
No, I haven't had a chance to talk yet.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Bergkamp, first of all, thank you for being here. Thanks
Not
for
a
teaching
problem.
our students. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
At an earlier life, I was a teacher at North High School,
Oh, God bless you.
and I was on the State Board of Education also.
Oh, God bless you for that, too.
So I understand what you're doing, and I appreciate project-based learning is what you're providing our students, and I think that's fantastic. I would truly do. One of the things that you said a little bit earlier, I'm trying to figure out how that we can show that this is green, okay? And as I was listening to your statements on how that we balance this between the grid and the solar panels that you have, the problem that I see from a green standpoint is that Evergy, who we're getting our power from, is going to be required to provide the same amount of power all the time, whether we've got a lot of sun or we've got a little bit of sun. The amount of power they're providing doesn't go down because they don't know when we're going to have a lot of sun or a little sun.
Yeah, the grid has to have a certain amount of carrying capacity. And you're right, in terms of, if you look at the vast amount of electricity that they have to produce, it's going to be a drop in the bucket. Okay, and that's what I tell my kids. It's like they'll say, "Hey, this is a drop in the bucket," and I said, "You're right, but it's our drop." And so, if you get a situation started where you do it, Mays High School does it, Goddard High School has come and looked at it, the Independent School has come and looked at it, is that if you get a situation where you have more and more of these buildings, more and more of these communities that are willing to do this, then eventually, yes, it is going to make a difference. They're not going to have to produce as much electricity, and that is where you're going to see the savings.
But how do they ramp up as we get a storm rolling through, and suddenly we don't have sun there? We can't have Evergy doing this all day long.
But what eventually is going to happen is that they can reduce that carrying capacity, because what you're going to see, the distribution system right now is based upon a spider web, where you have Jeffries Energy sitting at the center of that web, and that electricity flows out in only one direction, and that's how it's always been, because the energy companies have had an absolute monopoly in producing electricity, because none of the alternatives, solar, wind, whatever, were cheap enough to compete with them. What you're going to see in the future, as more and more Sedgwick County, Mays High School, whatever, become on GRI, you're going to see a series of microgrids where, and they have the technology, where they can, okay, there's a cloud coming in. Yes, they're going to be able to know that. They can ramp up that production. But then also, if you have the grid-sized batteries to say, okay, hey, yes, it's cloudy at Mays, but it's not on the southeast part of town, where you can have the capacity to switch that over within the batteries, within that structure, that is going to make a difference. But again, at some point, you have to start this. And if you wait until the end, you're never going to get anywhere. Someone has to take the leap of faith. And that's what's made, having growing up with a father who had to quit school after the 8th grade to work on the farm in the Great Depression. Dad's attitude was always, you are a steward of the earth. You are a steward of what you've been given. And it is your responsibility to leave this world a better place than how you found it. And so that is what your task is. It's like, is it going to make any, in the greater scheme of things, it might not make any difference. But it might inspire a generation of kids. It might inspire the next government to start to do something like this, Gene, God, or whatever. You have to be a leader. You have been entrusted with the fiscal and moral character of this community. And I see the benefits that come from this. I've seen kids cry in my classroom about this story. They're not going to cry about anything else, but they're going to shed tears over the passion of this because they're worried about it. You have, beyond just a fiscal responsibility, you have a moral obligation to be a leader in this community.
Okay. You just mentioned batteries. Do you have batteries installed in this system?
No, it's not cost effective at this point.
Okay.
Because we use it, we never store excess.
Okay. Are there expendables that are a part of this? I'm not an expert on this by any means, so I'm asking probably stupid
The
questions.
only thing, this is why I went with solar panels as opposed to like a wind turbine. The only moving parts are those inverters. And generally, you'll replace those after about 15 years. They have, I think those probably come with like a 10-year warranty on them. But that's the only moving part. The panels are rated up to 1-inch hail. They've consistently withstood up to 2.5-inch hailstones. So that's always the concern is, what if you get a hailstone in Kansas? Well, it's going to happen, but they're also rated up to, 1-inch hailstone is pretty big, and they've withstood them up to 2.5 inches. Because like I said, I've had them on my ranch since July of 2016. I have never touched anything, nothing. They're there. I don't even know that they're there. There are no moving parts.
Okay. We were talking earlier with some folks. They were going to put a system up in western Sedgwick County. I think that's kind of on hold right now. But
The one around College? Yeah.
when I was talking to the representative, his panels move during the day.
Yes.
Are these panels we're looking at, or you have, or the ones we're looking at, do they move during the day? So that they
With
can
the
see
size,
something?
even with mine's a 720 panel system. Even with that, it wasn't cost effective to have them move. You wouldn't, for that added cost, you wouldn't get that much return on your investment. So these will be fixed. Your optimum angle is facing due south. You could do that, but that would be throwing good money after bad.
All right. I'm sure that I'm not an expert by any means at this point, but I don't know that I've got good questions for you at this point, and I know you need to get back to school, so
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Any other questions?
Would you mind sharing your contact info with everybody just in case there are additional questions?
You just want to,
Yeah, what's
how,
your-
how do you want me to?
Actually, I have your email address. I could send it off to you
can you-
guys.
Okay.
Yeah.
Forward it to us.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk to anybody anywhere. Just let me know.
So much for coming out today. I really,
Okay.
really appreciate it.
Thanks for letting me talk.
Sure.
All right, thank you.
Andrew, you have one more slide left. Let's go through it, and then I think we're ready for any other final questions.
Installation and maintenance options, major life expectancy. As Stan was just saying, the inverters have a 12-year warranty. Replacement cost for our system is estimated at $35,000. Solar King expects to get 15 years out of the inverters. To make sure that we meet our payback period, we added the $3,300 extended warranty, so we have a warranty of 20 years to make sure that we get in the green before we have to replace any parts. Solar panels have a 25-year warranty. Again, the contractor believes we'll get 30 to 40 years out of those before we need to replace them, and the optimizers have a 25-year warranty. The included services with King Solar is to monitor the system and the output of the system, come back and clean the solar panels at year 2, 5, and 10, and then do preventative maintenance inspections. Again, this is 270 roof-mounted panels. We'll have 290 total. Here's an example of the roof-mounted panels. Maze High, Stan Burkamp's system here. We were going to throw 10 panels on the west side of the extension office to make them visible from the roof, and 10 panels on the east side of the extension office to make them visible from the roof. That is all. Do you have any questions for
On the
me?
roof, how are they mounted? Because the picture you showed was sandbags, and it doesn't look like you can throw sandbags on those roofs. Go back to the pictures.
Thank you.
Hey,
The metal here is in the shape of a U, and they tie the panels all together, and then these are actually cinder blocks setting on top of.
But now show the building. Now, how do you do that? That building is at an angle.
Yeah, the panels mounted on the side here would actually be mounted to the roof. That's correct.
So we're going to start drilling holes through the roof of the extension center.
That was just if they were on the roof to show them that, just as a visual to show people that we have them up there. But since we would propose to put them on the ground, we wouldn't need to put them on the side of the building because you can see them from the ground.
Andrew, we have no rendition of what a ground-mounted array would look like.
Other than Mays High now.
No, but on the south side, it would be on the south side of the extension complex, right?
Correct. Yeah, I would assume we would do something here where we don't have pavement, where we don't have parking.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Yes, was this sent out for competitive bid?
No, we've been working with one contractor at this point for information.
That's not our normal process.
We would have to go out for competitive bid. If you approve this tomorrow, we would have to go out for.
Why would we approve, how often do we do that?
Oh, I think,
That's typically what we do on CIP
We don't.
projects. We will approve the project and then we go out for bid.
But we're using numbers from a company. I mean, only one company?
Right, that's typically what we do for CIP projects, just to get an estimate so we understand what a CIP project would cost.
Okay.
Commissioner Howe.
This is normal process. You feel comfortable with this process, going one company, that this is normal?
That is so we can get an estimate for what a CIP.
So we don't even know how much it'll cost?
That is you're correct, that's an estimate, so we would go out for RFP. After this is approved, we would go out for RFP.
But we would have somebody, I mean, if it goes out for RFP, this is our starter. If someone comes in under this, it could potentially be less than this, right?
yes, and it comes back to you for another decision point after that process is complete, so you see final numbers before
It would
you
go through the bid board process that way for approval.
Isn't that space used for something else currently? I know it's not paved, it's not asphalt, but is that not a space that's cleared out that way for a reason?
I'm not aware of anything at this moment that that's being used for. There may be a special event of some kind.
I think we need to find that out, but I would just also say in terms of education, if you guys want to, if anybody really wants to provide education about solar panels, and if we really want to make these efficient, these need to be installed optimally if we go down this path. Putting solar panels on the north side of the building, for example, makes absolutely no sense. Because the sun incidence is from the south. We don't point panels to the north. It doesn't make sense at all. I mean, if we're trying to showcase panels, that they might get visibility, but the reality is people will look at that and think that doesn't make sense because they're not pointing towards the sun.
Correct.
So-
I think we'd end up mounting the panels somewhere south of the extension office.
Whatever panels we do install, if we do this at any point, we want to make sure that every panel is installed optimally to get the biggest, the biggest benefit to the county.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole point of this. And so, you might see the back side of the panel, but there's still a panel there. And the reality is, they don't have to see the front side of the panel to know that that's a panel. At the end of the day, I want to, in order to impress the community, we have to do this the right way if we're going to do it. And optimally is a very, very important part of this. And anyway, I guess I'd like to verify whether that space is really available. So I don't know that it is, but we'll see. Thank you.
Hey, and if we're going to look at something, we need to look at what the total cost is. And if we're worried about vandalism and we're worried about a fence, I need a cost. Don't bring me something and say, well, later on we're going to have to add this and this and this. I want to know what the total cost of this project is from end to end so that we can do similar what you have here is a payback period. And we can decide we're going to spend taxpayers' money, we're going to spend property taxpayers' money on this with a payback right now of up to 19 years, and that doesn't even include possibly all of the different expenses that we're going to have. So I'm ready to defer this, honestly, until you can bring back more information to us. So we can decide what to do tomorrow, but I'm not ready to make a decision tomorrow.
And when we do that, can we have other examples of where we've had a CIP come out so that we have all commissioners understanding how the CIP process works, so that this isn't just one case scenario?
I'm going to
Do that?
Yes, I want to have Lindsay talk about process, because I think what we were trying to get accomplished today was just to get the commission, or tomorrow through a vote, is the commission to say, go to the next step on this. Go through a competitive bid process, get final costs, cost one with fence, one without fence, bring it back to us, and have us vote on the actual expenditure of the money. Now, I believe, Commissioner O'Donnell, to answer your question, I believe that is, we do that a lot as a county. And I want to have Lindsay just talk about the process.
But before she does that, I thought you said, as far as process, you wanted to go out and do a energy study next year.
Yes.
Well, then, why would we be doing this now then if we need to do an energy study?
I mean, I think we can go down 2 or 3 paths at the same time. I don't think it has to be one at a time. I think comprehensively.
But what if the energy study says we need to invest $250,000 in new windows or doors or roof or, energy efficient toilets? How do we know that solar panels are the priority? Why would we start that until we see what the priority is?
Right.
Because we can save the environment by energy efficient toilets, right? I mean, I see that on TV. People talk about that all the time. The city of Wichita does rebates for that.
If that's the course that the commission would like us to take, we could do
Well,
that.
I'm just wondering, is solar panels the only way to be energy efficient?
I don't think it is.
Right.
I think LED lighting and other kinds of
course.
issues we should look
So
at.
we don't have that study, but you're wanting to do it next year, you said.
I think it makes sense to do it the next year. We'll have to talk about it through the budget process. The cost for the energy analysis, Tanya just showed me numbers, is going to be approximately $200,000 just for the analysis. So we'll have to determine where that money is going to come from and have the commission make the decision that that's the way we're going to migrate. And then depending on what that study shows, there'll be other challenges almost invariably. We know there's going to be other challenges to this building, to Reagan, to historic, on what we can do to be more efficient. This depends on what order you want us to go in.
Thanks.
Before Lindsay starts, it is 10:05. I've got a 10:30 meeting, and I'll be leaving. Is this the most important topic we have right now, or what else or is it important? If it's the most important topic, I don't have a problem with Lindsay pushing ahead.
I would like to finish this topic. It is on the agenda for Wednesday, and then we need to do legislative agenda.
Well, I'm ready to defer it on Wednesday, so we need to make sure that we're using our time today properly.
Okay. We can. You don't want Lindsay to talk?
Oh, if this is the most important topic, that's what I'm saying.
Well, I
We'll
think
turn it back over
just
to Lindsay.
Put this process question to rest on how we do CIP. Let's at least give her a minute, and we can.
I can do it in 30 seconds. So we have 2 policies that govern. We have a CIP policy, which has the CIP amendment process that's defined. And so this is what we typically do in any development of a CIP is we get quotes, and that comes from an outside entity, and then that's what's used to put together a proposed CIP. Then you have the charter that requires that we go out for bid or proposal before we spend money. However, the charter requires that we have dollars allocated before we go out. And so that's why a CIP amendment is necessary before we go and find out what real costs would be, what real options would be. And we can look at different scenarios and then come back to you through the bid board process for final approval before any expenditures are done. So those are the 2 policies we're following.
Questions over that? Very good. Thanks. Thank you, Andrew. Mike, legislative platform.
You have the handout, commissioners. I'm going to talk a little bit about this. And this is, I think, going to be a very brief presentation today because tomorrow we're really hoping to get a platform adopted by this commission. And some of what we might talk about this morning is just process for tomorrow. The priority issues, I've tweaked a little bit just to give you the update on that. On number 2, on the regional mental hospital, I've added 25 to 30 beds as recommended by the Mental Health Coalition. Number 5, I added the word judiciously under nuisance abatement authority to give legislators the idea that this isn't going to be used willy-nilly. And there are only a few examples that we have had over the years that we would use it, but it's certainly a tool that we want in our toolbox. And I've tightened up the joint partner statement a little bit to clearly reflect that what we're joining in is our partners, the Wichita Regional Chamber and the City of Wichita, on several specific types of issues. And then on the back page, I haven't done anything. It's still the 9 issues that we've talked about before, and I don't want to beat those to death. But for tomorrow, we can go through the platform, adopt the priority issues as a group, along with the joint partner statement. That's probably the issues that we're going to hand out on a palm card or something of that nature. On the second page, these are issues that can be used by staff and can be used by our lobbyist. We can go through those separately, get your approval with those. You have a choice whether to adopt the entire platform, whether you want to consider the platform both page 1 and page 2, or how you want to do it. I really need your guidance on how you guys want to proceed.
Well, good. Well, Mr. Papoon and I have talked about this a little bit, and I concur with his recommendation that tomorrow we go through and if we can adopt the priority issues and the joint partner statement, that is our foundation for our legislative platform. There's a lot of other things that are going to come up during the legislative session. Some of the things are probably not even on this recommendation of 9 other items that are other issues. But as we go through the session, we need to be ready to respond to any important issue that affects Sedgwick County. So tomorrow, if we would like to go through these other 9 and say whether or not that they're important enough that we want our lobbyists to fight for those immediately, or whether or not that we want to take some of them off or modify any of them so that we can then, at the time that something comes up, work with our lobbyists to make sure that they're worked. So I need you all's input on whether or not that this is a good way of going tomorrow.
I would say 1, 2, and 3 of the issues of importance, and also 9. Actually 8 could be directly related to county business as far as corrections and mental health funding. 8 has the potential for extra revenue, and 9 has the potential to keep a workforce here. So those things actually directly relate to our behavioral health initiative, which what we have all sort of said. So I would say that those for sure.
Actually, my question is, can we go through and vote tomorrow on the first page? And I think that we all pretty well agree on that first page.
Yep.
And if we could vote on the first page, that moves us forward a quantum leap. From there, we can take a look at the second page and decide whether those are ones that we want to immediately generate our legislative, our lobbyists to work, or should we pick certain ones out that we want him to start looking at and then add to this list as the legislative session goes on. So I think we need to vote on the first page first by itself. That's the point I'm getting at.
That's fine with me sitting from my chair.
I agree, Mr. Chairman. That sounds good to me.
Yeah, I would comment that first page is for sure, and actually all 9 on the second page have some level of positive impact for the county in general. We just don't know when they might elevate themselves one time or another, and other groups are working on, other organizations are working on supporting basically what most of the 9 of these are, so they could be.
Well, I'm just trying to move the process forward tomorrow as quickly.
No, that's why I agree with what the strategy is, and like I said, the other 9 are positive, but they don't need to be a bold front page statement at this point. I think we could address them as we run into them.
Okay, other comments, Commissioner Howell?
I think it's fine to vote on the first page as the place to start. On the second page, there's things about it I'm sure that some of us don't like, and we could probably all wordsmith it differently, but I'm willing to concede if others are. We'll see how it goes.
Very good. Any other comments? All right, Mr. Papoon, we'll play it by ear tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Bossel, you're up.
Morning, sir.
It's going to be difficult to follow that inspiring and passionate discussion about the energy efficiency, but I'll do my best to make it exciting. Thanks for having me here. Representing, my name's Basil Harani, representing Main Street Partners, owner of the 150 North Main building. You've all witnessed a very important downtown renaissance that has happened over the last few years. A few examples of that: the Cargill headquarters, Ambassador Hotel, River Vista Apartments, IMA Building, etc. All of the baseball stadium project, just to name a few. However, with all of this exciting activity that's going on downtown, there's still 800,000 square feet currently vacant in downtown and in need of redevelopment. And in a recent article in the Wall Street, in the Wichita Business Journal on September 27th of this year, they detailed the impact of the vacant spaces, how they negatively impact the economy and revitalization of downtown. The building in question that we bring to your attention today is the 150 North Main building right here, which is on First and Main. It's been vacant for 10 years approximately. It's been vandalized. It's been an eyesore to the community. I will point out that in addition to this building being vacant, the building right next to it here is also completely vacant. The Bank of America building has a lot of empty space. The Epic Center has a lot of empty space. The Antemidas building over here is empty. So within this immediate community right here, there is quite a bit of empty space. And that really talks about the 800,000 square feet that are empty and their impact. So why do we think there's a whole list of reasons why we think the 150 North Main building makes sense for the county administrative offices. It's really it's an opportunity for the county to be a partner with the downtown renaissance that's happening. Also gives us the opportunity to clean up that First and Main, very important part of the geography of downtown. Bring a non-performing building that's been vacant for 10 years. It's been vandalized. All kinds of issues have happened there. Bring it back to its best and efficient use. Help solve the oversaturated office space market in the downtown. Also avoid contributing to the problem. If you build a building here on campus, you're adding square footage as opposed to absorbing existing square footage in the community. Save taxpayer money. It is much more economical to renovate and redevelop an existing building as opposed to a brand new building. In fact, we believe there's going to be millions of dollars in savings, which the county can use the taxpayers' money to use for other projects. Example, the solar panels. You can equip all of your facilities with solar panels with the savings that we come up with here. This 149,000 square foot building gives you not only your immediate need for office space, but also as future needs arise. I'm sure your programs are forward-looking, but you really can't look forward 10 years and 15 years down the road. And what happens at that time? If you need more space beyond what you built today, what will happen at that time? So this building being 150,000 square feet gives you the opportunity to expand beyond your immediate needs over the next few years or however many your program has looked for. Also, it gives you the opportunity to consolidate some existing spaces that you lease throughout the town. The Ronald Reagan building, there's leases all over town. There's a possibility to consolidate and bring them back because you have the square footage, and also therefore saving taxpayers money in that regard. And then bring your staffing together into a centralized location. The way the building as it stands today is just under 150,000 square feet. 24,000 of it is in the basement. It's a solid structure. I'll tell you, when we started the demolition project of the interior, we were pleasantly surprised how beautiful and how well constructed that building is. They don't build like this anymore. These are amazingly thick concrete slabs and I-beams that are beyond what's needed for that building. 12-foot ceilings throughout the entire space. In fact, the first floor is actually 14-foot ceilings. Nobody builds like this anymore. I mean, this is really a beautiful structure. It's a mid-century architecture. We will be able to bring it back to its original character, obviously with updates. And it's been part of the downtown landscape for 70 years, I believe. It's currently in marketable condition, and with the interior demolition nearly complete, the building is ready to be transformed for a landmark building for the county. What we would offer to provide is a turnkey solution. We will work with your preferred architect in order to come up with the best vision and most efficient solution for your needs. We would be able to deliver the building in 16 to 20 months from decision date. Initially, we would construct and finish the square footage that you need immediately for your programs, and then to support your current needs. And then additional square footage that remain, whether it's 20, 30, or 50,000 square feet remaining that will be unfinished, can be used for future expansion or to bring back some of the leases that you have around town and save money that way. The redeveloped building will be energy efficient with new windows, new elevators, new HVAC, new electrical, new plumbing, and new finishes. It could be a green, environmentally friendly building, kind of following on the theme that you're thinking about with what the gentleman from Mays High School talked about, and being environmentally friendly. This building could be designed to be completely green from the ground up. There's nothing there left. We've taken everything out. What's left there is the exterior walls, the columns, and the floor and the ceilings, and nothing else is left. So we can redesign the entire thing to be a green, environmentally friendly building. This is a rendering that we put together, not necessarily something that you would adopt, but it's a vision that we could look at. In this particular vision, the 10-story building is right here. There is a 3-story section to it that we would demolish, and we would leave the 10-story building and remodel it and clean it up and make it energy efficient. We would build county commission chambers in this section here, along with county commissioner offices. We would beautify it by adding a clock tower, an outdoor green area for your staff to enjoy breaks and eat lunch and whatever. We could add a cafeteria and or an area for food trucks where you can have food trucks come in on a regular basis. This is just one particular vision that we can do. Obviously, we can work with your architects to come up with a vision that works specifically for your needs. As far as parking is concerned, this is how the building exists right now. There is 100 stalls available south of the building, right there. There is a covered sidewalk that already exists connecting this particular building with the parking garage on this side, which has 550 stalls available. This parking garage is largely empty. It's being used by 10 or 15 people in the Lux building next door for their parking, but it's largely empty. And we've had discussions with the ownership of the parking garage, and they're eager to make it available at we believe, on a favorable deal. To summarize what we've talked about, selecting the existing building will most certainly save taxpayers money in the tunes of millions of dollars, we believe. It is a lot more economical to redevelop an existing building than building a brand new building. Potentially potentially 50% in savings. Obviously, that all depends on your choices and what we end up doing. This will give us a fresh start with a without the higher cost and the time, and also the disruption needed for new building structure on campus. Because if you demolish the two-story building that you plan to demolish, you're going to have to move those people out of there, put them somewhere else for 2 to 3 years while you're building, and then bring them back. There's quite a bit of disruption. We would develop the square footage as needed for your immediate need, and then leave remaining footage for future needs. Consolidate existing office space from other spots around the town, potentially, those that make sense. Obviously, some of them don't make sense to bring to this area. Some of them need to remain where they are, but some would certainly make sense to bring them back. It's an economically competitive solution, saving taxpayers money. You get to be a partner with the Downtown Renaissance, renovating that beautiful building, important corner, First and Main, energy-efficient building, and county becomes an instrumental partner in the renaissance of downtown. That's my presentation. I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Of these 650 slots, how many come with the building?
The 100 to the south of the building. Go back to that. The 100 slots there come with the building. The 550 over here, however many we need, can be leased from the owner of this building. We can develop a long-term lease and figure out a very attractive solution for the county.
So the county is going to assume a long-term responsibility for paying for renting slots. When I'm looking at a building, I'm looking at life cycle cost of that building.
Right.
I'm not looking at what it cost us to buy it today or to build it today. I'm looking at what it's going to cost us, the taxpayers, for the next 50, 75 years.
I totally agree with that, yes.
And if we're going to look at that, renting stalls, 550 or whatever it's going to take us to rent for the next, I need to know what that cost is. Right now, you presented an interesting proposition that we need to turn over to the staff to cost out for us. But until I know what the life cycle cost of this building is, to build the building, to make sure that we have adequate parking for the customers and for the employees, the fact that we're going to leave behind a parking garage that we've got over here that probably will be only 35-40% occupied at that point in time. There's a lot of costs involved. It's an interesting proposition, but from this point, now we need to turn it over to the staff and have the staff take a look at it and develop the same kind of things that we've been doing all along. Because we took a look at this a year ago, if you recall. We reviewed it, and we actually, as I recall, took a vote to remove this because it's outside the footprint for the area that we need to look at. Because if we do something like this, I think we've got to go to a different commission in order to be able to fund this. We can't just bond it here like we normally do. So there's a whole lot of different questions. I appreciate you presenting it to us today, but I probably got more questions than you have answers right now.
Well, so I appreciate your comments, and Commissioner and Chairman, and your approach is very logical. You need to know the overall cost. In relation to the three block area that you're talking about, the 3-block area actually ends right here in this corner, and this building is right across the street from the 3-block area. So I don't know what it takes legally to go beyond this. However, as far as the overall cost in relation to parking and overall construction and design and all of that, obviously we would need to understand from your staff your specific needs in terms of how many parking slots you anticipate you need, and we can put all of that together. Last year, when we presented, we kind of had a general idea, but didn't have very, very much specific, but more than I have today, actually. This time around, I haven't had any discussions as far as the specific needs as they are today. So if we're able to sit down with your staff, if this is a viable option for you, and really my point here, whether you decide to do it with this building or any other building downtown, any other empty building, I think you'll be doing the city and downtown a major service by absorbing existing square footage as opposed to adding additional square footage to the city. And so whether you do it with our building or any other building that's available, that's perfectly fine from my perspective as a taxpayer, because either way, you're going to be saving a lot of money. We're talking about a serious amount of money. But I do agree with you that we need to be able to get you a projection over the next 50 years, what's it going to cost in relation to the overall project, not just the building and construction, but the cost of ownership. And one more point, I would say that if by making this building a green, energy efficient building, totally green, it would pay for itself in addition to the overall savings that we're talking about as compared to a brand new structure.
Well, thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell?
Thank you very much, Basil. So the first thing in regards to Commissioner Dennis's question, I think it would probably behoove you and your group to go to the gentleman that owns the parking garage and ask if he would sell it or, you know, enter into a partnership where out of the 550 stalls, the county owns half of it so that we're not in a lease, see if there's any opening there potentially. And then what I would like, when you brought up existing leases, what I would like to see is staff say out of our leases, and I believe Tanya had sent me a list a while back, say, okay, so we have 20 leases or something. Obviously, something like a tag office, we're not going to, you know, move there. But of the leases we have, what could go in there and what over time through attrition could we bring in? So like downtown we lease for like the children's ComCare and stuff, not too far from there. How many of those, as they phase out, could we bring in over a 10, 20-year period for other leases? I'd be interested to see if staff could get a cost savings on that and what leases make sense.
Right.
Because like you said, some of them don't.
Right.
I mean, we might not want, you know, some of our adult detention,
Right.
you know, work release program there or something.
Yeah, my objective today is to present this as a solution, to present the overall problem of what's going on with the empty space downtown, compare this to a new construction versus a remodel. But if this building is a potential solution for you, I'm very happy to work with the parking situation, figure out specific numbers, work with your staff to understand the overall picture and the potential relocation.
And the other thing about parking, and it's in this picture, you could build onto that area south of the building.
We could.
And you could build your own structure there, so we would never have to lease. You could build a structure with a few hundred parking spots.
We can. This rendering right here shows 4-level parking. It's just the rendering. But you could actually do this. You could go 4 or 5 level and be self-sustained with your own parking without having to lease anything.
Right.
Obviously, there's a cost involved with that.
I do agree with the chairman, what he said. It does get sloppy over a long period of time with, because then if they come in and arbitrarily raise the rates or something, we're stuck.
Right.
So it's good to own our own, we want our own parking.
Well, there's the potential of potentially purchasing the parking garage.
Because Cargill had used that previously, right? And
Cargill used it, and now they've left the area. Right. The new tenant of that building is Ameritrust. They don't need the space, so it's largely empty. I think the owner most likely could be motivated to do something there. So whether we figure out to purchase this parking garage or to build over here as this rendering shows, either way, there's a cost involved with that, which would need to be added to the overall picture. Right. But my purpose here today is this a viable option for you? If it is, I'll work with your staff and we can figure out overall cost. Go from
I think last year when we voted on that, I don't believe Commissioners Meister and Cruz were here. Is that correct?
They were not.
Right. Okay.
Just as a point of reference, I do have one question. I know there are some people who work in this building that are parking out, say, on the south compound here, and they have free parking. But I think some of the staff from the treasurer's office and the deeds and the clerk's office, if they park in the parking garage, as in the election commissioner's office, they have to pay for their own parking. That's not paid for by us. So I think we have negotiated rates, of course, with the management of the parking garage. But at the end of the day, that's not free to those people. And our visitors that come to this building, unless they get a validated ticket, which a lot of them don't, they're paying for parking as well. So just want to make sure we know that.
Commissioner, last year when we put that study together, we actually compared how much you're paying for that for the existing parking here versus what's going to happen there. So we can do that exercise again, figure out how much the employees are, how much it's costing the county, whether the employees are paying for it or you're paying for it, versus what would happen there in the overall scheme of things.
Thank you for coming. Thank you. My only comment would be, last night we all sat with the Riverfront Legacy Master Plan. This is 2 blocks from where a performing arts center is going to be erected. That to me, when I look at functionality of everything that we have, and I actually printed off the property leased by Sedgwick County, like what makes sense to go in there. I absolutely agree with Commissioner O'Donnell as far as, we might not want to intermingle all of these services. So just because it is a possibility doesn't mean that it should be done. Yeah. When you talk of the Wichita Renaissance downtown, I think that I just wonder what else could this building be used for that might fit better in that area, given the fact that, it is, even if it's just right over the line of the 3 blocks, it's still over the line of the 3 blocks. So that, to me, I think is something that we need to take into consideration as far as our governmental hub, functionality of all departments, not just those that are leased. So that's something that I want to take into consideration. Could this be used for something else that would benefit Wichita a little bit better than Sedgwick County government?
So there's 2 questions there, and I'm happy. Thank you for Commissioner. One, first of all, in relation to what could this building be used for? Well, it could be used for, as we've seen throughout what's going on downtown, it could be converted into apartments, perhaps, or an office building. If you look at the apartment situation, it's currently overbuilt. We've talked to pretty much all of the apartment landlords that have property in downtown or in Delano or, for example, River Vista. And the apartment market currently is pretty soft, meaning we have overbuilt. And we have now the EPC coming in Delano, just south of the public library. They're building 250 additional units. That's really going to slow the market for many, many years. So I don't think there's any appetite to build any apartments. So if we're waiting for apartments to happen in these empty buildings, it's going to be a long time before we get there. As far as office space, it's 800,000 square feet of office is a very large inventory. It would take a lot of years to fill that if we ever fill them. So the fact that we have these projects and build with the Cargill and Ameritrust and IMA and all of these is wonderful, but that leaves the 800,000 square feet really as a problem. So it could remain empty for years to come. This building and the several other buildings that are empty could remain building. Now, in terms of co-locating, potentially this building right here could be for your legal, for your DA, for your judicial, for your law enforcement, where they all work together, the functions that actually need to be together and work together. And this other building could be for your administrative offices and customer needs and things that, whether you decide to consolidate from other locations or not, and some of them could be relocated to that building, along with administrative functions, really could be a cohesive solution, different than what's going on in this building in relation to judicial and DA and court systems and so on. I don't know if that answers your question, but as far as what could happen in that building, of course, if somebody comes and says we need to put 100 apartments in there, great, but I don't think that's going to happen given the capacity and how much capacity there is in terms of apartments, and 800,000 square feet of empty office is very, very difficult to fill, I think.
But if it does go into office or apartments, it is on the tax rolls for USD 259, City of Wichita and Sedgwick County, and if we go into there, none of it's on the tax rolls. Also, if you're saying that apartments aren't a good idea, that's a large part of the East Bank master plan that's going in right now. So what you're telling me is that the East Bank master plan is not a viable plan.
Well, no. Well, I mean, it may be viable for a moment, but, you know, there's...
All right. Appreciate your time today. I do have another meeting.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I think we'll go ahead and save the Northeast Park for a later meeting.
Yeah.
So, okay. I think that's all we had then, sir.
We stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Basil.